Hello and welcome back to Daily English Dialogue. I'm Sarah.
And I'm Tom. Thanks for joining us today.
In our previous episodes, we've covered many conversation topics. Today, we're focusing on something that many professionals find challenging: how to participate effectively in English meetings. We'll teach you how to speak up confidently, give your opinion, agree and disagree politely, and contribute to discussions professionally.
Whether you're attending team meetings, video conferences, or client presentations, knowing the right phrases will help you participate with confidence. Many people, especially non-native speakers, find it difficult to interrupt politely or share ideas in meetings. We'll give you the tools to overcome that challenge. As always, we'll speak slowly and clearly, and we'll review all the important phrases at the end.
Let's get started.
Let's begin with one of the most challenging aspects: how to start speaking in a meeting. Many people have great ideas but struggle to find the right moment to speak up. The key is using polite phrases to get everyone's attention. You can say, "Can I just say something?" Or, "May I add something here?" Or, "If I could just jump in here." These phrases politely signal that you want to speak. In more formal meetings, you might say, "May I make a point?" Or, "If I may contribute here." For interrupting someone politely when they're speaking, say, "Sorry to interrupt, but," or, "Excuse me, can I just add something?" Or, "I hate to interrupt, but I think." The word "sorry" or "excuse me" softens the interruption and makes it polite.
Exactly. Interrupting in English business culture is more acceptable than in some other cultures, as long as you do it politely. You can also wait for a natural pause and then say, building on what Tom just said. Or, "That's a great point, and I'd like to add." Or, going back to what Sarah mentioned earlier. This shows you're listening and connecting your point to the discussion. If the meeting is very formal or you want to be extra polite, you can raise your hand slightly or use virtual meeting features like the raise hand button. Then say, "I have a point about that," or "I'd like to share my perspective on this." The key is being assertive but respectful. Don't wait for the perfect moment because it may never come, but also don't talk over people rudely.
Now, let's talk about how to express your opinion once you have the floor. There are many ways to share your thoughts, from casual to formal. For casual or moderate formality, you can say, "I think," or "this in my opinion," or "from my perspective," or "the way I see it." These are straightforward and commonly used. For example, "I think we should focus on the European market first," or, "In my opinion, this approach is too risky." If you want to sound more tentative or less direct, use "I feel that," or "It seems to me that," or "I would say that." For instance, "I feel that we need more data before deciding," or "It seems to me that this timeline is too ambitious."
Those are great. For stronger, more confident opinions, say, "I firmly believe that," or "I'm convinced that," or "I strongly feel that." For example, "I firmly believe we need to change our strategy," or "I'm convinced this will increase sales significantly." When you want to present your view as one possibility among many, say, "One option could be," or "What if we," or "Have we considered," or "Another way to look at this is." These invite discussion rather than stating something definitively. You can also say, "From my experience," or "Based on what I've seen," to give context for your opinion. For instance, "From my experience in marketing, social media campaigns work better than email," or "Based on what I've seen, customers prefer the blue design."
When someone says something you agree with, it's important to show support. This encourages good ideas and builds positive team dynamics. For strong agreement, say, I completely agree with that, or exactly, or that's absolutely right, or I couldn't agree more, or you've hit the nail on the head. This means you've identified exactly the right point. For moderate agreement, say, I agree with Sarah on this, or that's a good point, or I think Tom is right, or that makes sense to me. You can also build on someone's idea, I agree, and I'd like to add, or great point, and we could also, or building on what you said. For partial agreement, which is common in business, say, I agree to some extent, but, or that's partly true, however, or I see your point, though I think, or you're right about X, but regarding Y.
These partial agreement phrases are very useful because they let you acknowledge someone's idea while adding your own perspective. It's more diplomatic than simply disagreeing. You can also say, that's an interesting perspective, or I appreciate that viewpoint, even if you don't fully agree. This shows respect for the speaker. When you want to express enthusiastic support, use brilliant idea or I love that approach or that's an excellent suggestion. These create positive energy in meetings. Remember, showing agreement isn't just about being polite. It helps build consensus and moves discussions forward. Even simple phrases like, yes, definitely, or I'm on board with that, can be very effective.
Disagreeing in meetings requires special care, especially in professional English. You need to be clear about your position without offending anyone. Never say you're wrong or that's a bad idea directly. This is too harsh and unprofessional. Instead, use softening phrases. Start with, I see what you're saying, but, or I understand your point, however, or that's one way to look at it, though I think. These acknowledge the other person before disagreeing. You can also say, I have a slightly different view, or I'd like to offer an alternative perspective, or I'm not sure I agree with that approach, or I see it differently. For a stronger disagreement while staying polite, say, I have some concerns about that, or I'm afraid I can't support that idea because, or with respect, I disagree, or I appreciate that view, but I have reservations.
Exactly right. The key is being diplomatic. You can also disagree by asking questions rather than making direct statements. Try, have we considered the risks of that approach? Or what about the cost implications? Or I'm wondering if that would work given our timeline. Or could there be downsides to that? These questions make people think without directly challenging them. Another technique is to use we instead of you. Say, should we think about other options instead of you should think about other options? This makes it collaborative rather than confrontational. You can also present your disagreement as a concern for the team. My worry is that, or I'm concerned that this might, or one potential issue could be. This frames disagreement as looking out for everyone's interests, not just contradicting someone.
Asking good questions is crucial for effective meeting participation. It shows you're engaged and thinking critically. For clarification, say, could you clarify what you mean by, or can you explain that a bit more, or what exactly do you mean when you say shiaki, or I'm not sure I understand. Could you elaborate? For requesting more information, use could you give us more details about, or can you walk us through, or what's the timeline for this, or how would that work in practice? When you want to challenge an assumption diplomatically, ask, what data do we have to support that? Or has this been tested? Or what makes us confident this will work? These are professional ways to request evidence without being confrontational.
You can also use questions to steer discussion in a new direction. Try, what if we approach this differently? Or has anyone considered? Or what are the alternatives? Or what would happen if we? Another useful technique is summarizing to check understanding. So if I understand correctly, you're saying, or just to clarify, are you suggesting that, or let me make sure I've got this, we're planning to. This ensures everyone is on the same page. When you genuinely don't understand something technical or specialized, don't pretend. Say, I'm not familiar with that term. Could you explain it? Or for those of us who aren't experts in this area, could you break that down? This is professional, not weak. It ensures clear communication. Remember, asking questions shows engagement. Not ignorance.
Now, let's discuss how to make suggestions and proposals in meetings. For gentle suggestions, use maybe we could, what about, how about we, or why don't we, for example. Maybe we could postpone this decision until next week, or what about running a small pilot first, or how about we get input from the sales team? These are casual and non-threatening. For stronger proposals, say, I suggest that we, or I propose we see, or I recommend, or we should consider. For instance, I suggest that we hire an external consultant, or I propose we allocate more budget to marketing, or I recommend postponing the launch by 2 weeks. When presenting options, say, we have a few options here, or there are several ways we could approach this, or one possibility is, another is. This shows you've thought through multiple scenarios.
You can also use conditional language to make proposals less direct. It might be worth, or we could potentially, or it may be beneficial to. For example, it might be worth surveying customers first, or we could potentially partner with another company, or it may be beneficial to wait for the market research results. When you want to be diplomatic about suggesting changes to someone else's idea, say, what if we modified this slightly by, or could we enhance this by adding, or one improvement might be? This respects their contribution while offering your input. To gain buy-in for your suggestion, explain the benefits. If we do this, will, or the advantage of this approach is, or this would allow us to. For example, if we launch early, we'll beat our competitors to market. Or the advantage is lower risk. Always support suggestions with reasoning, not just opinions.
You can also use conditional language to make proposals less direct. It might be worth, or we could potentially, or it may be beneficial to. For example, it might be worth surveying customers first, or we could potentially partner with another company, or it may be beneficial to wait for the market research results. When you want to be diplomatic about suggesting changes to someone else's idea, say, what if we modified this slightly by, or could we enhance this by adding, or one improvement might be. This respects their contribution while offering your input. To gain buy-in for your suggestion, explain the benefits. If we do this, will, or the advantage of this approach is, or this would allow us to. For example, if we launch early, we'll beat our competitors to market, or the advantage is lower risk. Always support suggestions with reasoning, not just opinions. Let's talk about phrases for managing meeting flow and keeping discussions productive. If the discussion is going off topic, you can redirect politely. That's interesting, but perhaps we should return to, or we're getting a bit off track. Let's refocus on, or can we table that discussion for later and return to? If people are talking over each other, say, let's hear from one person at a time, or Tom, you were saying something, or let Sarah finish her point, then we'll hear from others. When you want to move forward, use shall we move on to the next point? Or are we ready to make a decision on this? Or can we wrap up this topic? Or I think we've covered this thoroughly. Next item.
To summarize discussion before deciding, say, let me summarize what we've discussed. Or, so the main points are, or to recap, we've agreed that, or from what I'm hearing, the consensus is. When you want to ensure everyone participates, try, we haven't heard from everyone yet. Name, what do you think? Or does anyone else have thoughts on this? Or before we decide, let's make sure everyone has weighed in. If you're running out of time, say, we have 10 minutes left, so let's focus on, or in the interest of time, let's, or we should probably wrap this up soon. At the end, confirm action items. So to confirm, Tom will handle X by Friday and Sarah will do Y, correct? Or let's make sure we're clear on next steps. Being able to manage flow shows leadership, even if you're not running the meeting.
Since many meetings are now virtual, let's cover video conference-specific phrases. For technical issues, say, sorry, I'm having audio problems. Can you hear me now? Or could you repeat that? You were breaking up. Or I think you're on mute. Or your screen isn't sharing, we can't see it. Or the connection is unstable. Should we switch to phone? For joining late, apologize briefly. Sorry I'm late. Could someone catch me up quickly? Or apologies for joining late. What did I miss? When you want to speak but aren't sure if you're muted or if people can hear you, say, can everyone hear me okay? Or is my audio working? For screen sharing, say, can everyone see my screen? Or I'm going to share my screen now. Or let me pull up that document. Since many meetings are now virtual, let's cover video conference-specific phrases. For technical issues, say, sorry, I'm having audio problems. Can you hear me now? Or could you repeat that? You were breaking up. Or I think you're on mute. Or your screen isn't sharing, we can't see it. Or the connection is unstable. Should we switch to phone? For joining late, apologize briefly. Sorry I'm late. Could someone catch me up quickly? Or apologies for joining late. What did I miss? When you want to speak but aren't sure if you're muted or if people can hear you, say, can everyone hear me okay? Or is my audio working? For screen sharing, say, can everyone see my screen? Or I'm going to share my screen now. Or let me pull up that document. It's important to understand that meeting culture varies across countries. In some cultures, speaking up and challenging ideas is expected and valued. In others, it's seen as disrespectful. In American and British business culture, meetings are generally collaborative. Everyone is expected to contribute ideas, ask questions, and even disagree respectfully with senior colleagues. Silence can be interpreted as disengagement or lack of ideas. However, interrupting someone mid-sentence is still considered rude, which is why we use polite interruption phrases. Direct disagreement is acceptable as long as it's framed diplomatically. Senior people often expect and welcome different perspectives from junior team members.
If you're from a culture where hierarchy is more important and direct disagreement is uncommon, you may need to adjust your communication style in English business meetings. Remember that contributing your ideas is seen as professional and valuable, not arrogant or disrespectful. Your colleagues want to hear your thoughts. That said, how you express disagreement matters. Always use the diplomatic phrases we've taught you. Be aware that in virtual meetings with international participants, there may be multiple communication styles at play. Some people will be very direct, others more reserved. Try to find a middle ground. Be clear and assertive about your ideas, but also respectful and open to other viewpoints. The goal is collaborative problem solving, not winning arguments. Active participation shows engagement, professionalism, and leadership potential.
Let's review essential meeting participation phrases. Starting to speak. Can I just say something? May I add something? If I could jump in. Sorry to interrupt, but building on what was said. Giving opinions. I think. In my opinion. From my perspective. I firmly believe. Based on my experience. Agreeing. I completely agree. Exactly. That's a good point. Building on that. I couldn't agree more. Disagreeing politely. I see your point, but I have a different view. With respect, I disagree. I have some concerns about. Have we considered the risks?
Asking questions. Could you clarify? Can you elaborate? What exactly do you mean? What data supports that? How would that work? Making suggestions. Maybe we could, I suggest that. What about, one option is, it might be worth. Managing flow. Let's refocus on. Shall we move on? To summarize, let's hear from everyone. Video calls. Can you hear me? You're on mute. Can everyone see my screen? I have a question when there's a moment. Remember, be assertive but polite. Contribute actively, listen carefully, and support your points with reasoning. Now you have the tools to participate confidently in English meetings. Remember, contributing your ideas shows professionalism and engagement. Don't wait for the perfect moment. Use these phrases to speak up and share your valuable perspectives.
Practice these phrases before your next meeting. You might even write down a few key ones to have ready. The more you participate, the more natural it becomes. Thank you for listening to Daily English Dialogue. Don't forget to subscribe for more helpful English conversations.
Tell us in the comments, what's your biggest challenge in English meetings? Is it speaking up, disagreeing politely, or something else? We'd love to hear from you. Keep practicing every day. Until next time, happy learning. Goodbye, everyone.
See you in the next meeting.